Hello and welcome back, Lamplighters. Sorry for the clickbaity title. I'm still trying to make YouTube love me with its algorithm and decide that I'm worthy of YouTube fame. This is 5 games that you aren't playing that are risking you losing your status as a true gamer. Recent games. Just to start off the video here, I wanted to mention that all these games are fairly recent. The main reason I chose to do recent games isn't because I don't think old games deserve their recognition, but because there's such a saturation in the market these days that it seems like a lot of games get overlooked, and I just don't know if that's really a good thing, and I want to make sure they get recognized. They usually don't get great followings either, which is usually disappointing to me. Maybe I'm just making this video because every time I buy a new game and someone hasn't heard of it, I get annoyed and I have no one to talk to, so now I'm going to talk to you about it so you can talk back to me about it. And I think you should be playing them because beyond the fact that they're just good games, they truly are games that define genres and could end up being some of your favorites. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone you haven't played these. Number 1 on our list, Don't Starve Together, 2016. Don't Starve Together, according to Steam, is fight, farm, build, and explore together, and the standalone multiplayer expansion to the uncompromising wilderness survival game Don't Starve. All in all, this isn't a terrible description, and granted I didn't get the entire thing, that's just the snippet I took off of Google's face. If I take any issues with it, it's that others didn't play Don't Starve, so any reference to it in this review probably doesn't land. And even if they did play Don't Starve Together isn't still understood fully. I can tell this best by the statements based off of Google's most asked questions, with such questions as, what's the point of Don't Starve Together? Is it worth playing Don't Starve Together? Do I get 2 copies of Don't Starve Together? And is Don't Starve and Don't Starve Together the same game? It's clear that not everyone knows what's going on with this thing. To start, one thing many people don't understand about the Don't Starve series is it actually has a very rich narrative. I won't get into it, mainly because exploring and solving the mystery of the islands is the game, but also because I believe Don't Starve is at best when you come to it with fresh eyes. And while I do acknowledge that it is uncompromising, it's kind of hard to put into words how different the survival is in Don't Starve. It can be played and manipulated in many different ways, with many different characters who all approach survival in different ways, and it can take some time to understand. Believe me, if it weren't for YouTubers like Beard777, I probably wouldn't have made it through half of the Don't Starve Together series. But learning the game didn't diminish my enjoyment of it by any measure. If anything, it gave me a deeper appreciation of how much work the devs have put into these kind of games, and also inspired me to try other titles from Klei, like Oxygen Not Included and Mark of the Ninja. While vastly different games, it was just the inspiration I needed to go from one great game to another. Don't Starve Together is the first in the list, mainly because of its visual style. You may have stumbled across this one before. At least visually, you could have seen it within titles, or you may have just seen the little main character that's been peeking out back at you in the past. It's also entirely possible that you played it for the first time, it was too difficult, and you gave up on it. If you look up enough people's playthroughs, you can kind of get an idea of where to start with the game, and you'll be mastering it in no time. Without sounding like a broken record, especially with people on YouTube that have already covered Don't Starve Together a ton, I can say my negative section for this largely bears on the seafaring part of Don't Starve Together. In my opinion, it was already a poorly implemented mechanic. Then after a misstep, Klei doubled down and put certain important items behind seafaring walls, which, while I concede it has improved greatly over the years, it still has yet to have impressed me much. Also, without sounding too much like a noob, I do understand there are people out there that aren't exactly entertained by the idea of going to look up videos on how to learn to play a video game, so I do understand why it scared a lot of people away as well. One last thing I felt important to note is the question posed earlier, if Don't Starve and Don't Starve Together are different. Not only are they extremely different, it does feel like a little reductionist to call it an expansion, because honestly, it's bigger than the original game, and it was getting developer updates constantly as opposed to the original, which is basically faded into obscurity. I just thought that was worth mentioning. So not really doing this by category, but an honorable mention for survival games that you maybe haven't tried would be Pathologic or Pathologic 2. These ones definitely have a way higher learning curve and are the kind of games that will frustrate you and make you kind of mad that you spent money on them and that you're never going to play them again because they're so damn hard. But if you're really looking for a challenge and amazing narrative, I can't recommend them enough. Number 2 on our list is Prey 2017. So, I'm literally sitting here reading the description of Prey in front of me, off of Wikipedia, and talk about spoilers. Short of telling the ending, this description basically spoils the entire first half of the game. So we're definitely skipping that, and I would recommend that you also skip looking up this game if you're going to do it first. I understand the game is from 2017, and most people have probably seen Let's Plays of these games, but it's definitely worth playing it yourself. What I can tell you about Prey is that it's a first-person shooter directly inspired by games like Fallout 4 and Bioshock, which are actually the honorable mentions for this section anyhow. Once you play the game, its visual style is very unique, and you'll fall in love with it quickly. But I believe that being that it was a first-person shooter from 2017, it kind of got lost in the mire. It had also been planned to have been released in 2006, but that game is completely gone, and had to be almost completely rebuilt by Arcane. Listening to dev interviews, they were also excited about the 2006 Prey release, but by the time they got their hands on it, it needed to be totally revamped and became an almost completely different game by the end. Interestingly enough, this is actually one of the few things that does get brought up by Bethesda fans when I ask them. I will once in a while hear someone say, "Isn't that game about saving your grandpa on a ship?" Let's just say if you remember anything from the 2006 Prey, you could forget it for this particular video that we're doing now. It's clear that the devs put a lot of love into the game and took a lot of inspiration from the production company Bethesda as well as their own work on games like Dishonored. And it's possible that it just fell at a bad timeline and was lost to obscurity. It's worth noting that Super Mario Odyssey, Horizon Zero Dawn, Assassin's Creed Origins, and Wolfenstein 2, and Game of the Year that year was Breath of the Wild, all came out at the same time. So it's possible that it also just got forgotten or passed over by some bigger titles at the time. Yes, I see the frustrated people in the back raising their hands saying, excuse me, I did play Prey, but isn't it still surprising how many people haven't? Sometimes the most surprising of these can be Bethesda fans themselves. I would say almost half the time I'm having a discussion about Skyrim, Fallout, or Doom, but I bring up Prey being under Bethesda's umbrella, more often than not people say, I've never played that. This game has the ability to indulge a high-paced action of a first-person shooter with clever sneak mechanics and physics mechanics, all while delivering a satisfying narrative that has a very high replayability. I wish I could get more into the story, but you'll just have to play it for yourself. And if you're a Bethesda fan or an Arcane Studios fan, this is certainly worth a try, and it's a lot better than the other Bethesda Arcane joints. While I have a pretty strong personal bias for this game, and it's pretty hard for me to mark it down with negatives, it does have its typical Bethesda bugs. The game will crash once in a while, and if you jump hard enough into some walls, you can get yourself into some pretty crazy places with some pretty notable 7-minute speed runs. But honestly, my biggest issue with it is probably the same issues that I've had with Skyrim or Fallout over the years, where the opening is very fun for the first time, nostalgic even, but upon my 5th playthrough, I find myself pretty frustrated running through the test center, already knowing what's happening at the end of this prolonged cutscene. I'll end this section on the note that the gameplay, while being very fun, isn't actually what kept me coming back to this game. Exploration is taken to a whole new level on Talos 1. It's a massive space station, and with a deep story to the background, there's also a background narrative that is dealing with the human mind and the consequences of losing it, and the premise of expanding it in ways that will stick with you long after the game has ended. I hope you'll be able to appreciate the amount of film I had to leave on the cutting room floor just so I could try and keep spoilers out of this. Jesus! Number 3, Detroit, Become Human, 2018.
Make your choices. Decide who you are and want to become. This world doesn't like those who are different, Marcus. Don't let anyone tell you who you should be. Let's go to the studio.
Alright, luckily this game we can talk a lot more about than the last one. So, Detroit Become Human is more or less a point-and-click adventure with quick-time commands in between, but really the best way to think of it is one long-running movie that you're interacting with at the same time. Throughout the game, you play as 3 different characters, Kara, Connor, and Marcus, all androids, not only becoming aware that they're having emotions, but beginning to question what it means for androids to have rights, and in a world that has mainly not been too kind to them up until this point. You'll follow the characters like Marcus, who are an example of androids who are around humans, who not only allowed them to do things outside of tasks assigned to them, but encouraged them to try things like painting, playing music, and reading books. As well as you also play as Kara, who lives in a stark comparative world, where she is currently taking care of a little girl, while an abusive, neglectful father uses the android for home care and his own personal punching bag. Down to our third character, Connor, a police android who has trouble questioning any authority at all, and struggles the most at breaking free from the restrictions placed on by humans. This is another game that, even after the game has finished, leaves you with a lot of philosophical questions and ideas moving forward. Not only in the way that we treat people in our own lives, but with the rising conversations around AI and what that could mean for humans in the future, this game tackles a lot of those questions, including some of the most difficult ones, like what if people misuse Android technology, and how will we adapt to working with androids in the future? As mentioned, I still mention negatives about these games to be fair, despite my clear personal bias. While it might be seen as a positive for some, and I would like to think most, it could probably also be interpreted as a negative that it is one long playable movie. There can definitely be times where the game drags, especially if you're not really jiving with one of the characters. By the end of the story, it wraps it up to a point where you start to feel for everybody, but I'll be honest, in the beginning it takes everything in me not to just turn off the game when I want to get past those Kara levels. Not because of Kara, she's great, it's the abusive drug addict that I don't really want to clean up for, and that section really drags for me. The honorable mention section of this I'm definitely just going to give to All Other Quantic Dream Games. That is the developer of this game, and they definitely have a unique style that is exactly what this is. I can't recommend most of their other games if you haven't tried games like Indigo Prophecy, Beyond Two Souls, or Heavy Rain. They're well worth your time. The only reason they didn't make it on the list, or at least they didn't make it instead of Detroit, is just that Detroit is a more updated version of those, in my opinion, and definitely has a better way of playing certain mechanics that Heavy Rain didn't quite have mastered yet. Number 4, Lost Judgment, 2022.
Come on, man. You know we can't just leave this be.
Now talk about modern games, but this is one of the ones where I definitely feel like people didn't get enough time to see what this was, and didn't realize it even came on the market because it got released around so many other really great games. I'll just start this entire section off by saying that Ryu Ga Gotoku games are some of the best games in the biz. Yes, I understand this list comes with a lot of personal bias, but I like to believe that I'm a pretty well-established gamer, and then, in my opinion, at least has a little bit of license here. You may recognize Ryu Ga Gotoku from their work on Yakuza games. I can say with certainty if you enjoyed those games, even a little, this game is absolutely for you. First, a quick rundown. The Steam description reads, when a police officer discloses the murder of a student teacher who bullied his son to suicide, the twisted secrets of Yokohama High School bleed out. Nothing in this case is black and white. I really love how, for anyone who has ever played like a Yakuza game, or even this game, know how hard it would be to describe how crazy these games can get, and they just try to keep that description as base level as possible. Well, this is the foundation of the game, and it's the backdrop that you'll kind of have driving you the entire time. If you've ever played any games by this company, you know that these are usually very silly games that can be inappropriate and have a ton of Japanese humor, a well-built, well-recognizable map, and an expansive open world that you can play in for hours and hours without actually doing the story and never feeling tired. Bored of looking for a murder? Why not go play Fatal Fight? Tired of running down pesky teens? Why not play some Sonic? Perhaps that you found the noir backdrop a bit too demure. Let's go sing some karaoke. Lost Judgment is amazing. It's a sequel from a developer that clearly cares a ton about their games. The combat is intuitive and fun. The story can be intensely silly and downright outlandish, and then 60 seconds later turn into a grim crime drama that'll have you on the edge of your seat. I don't like giving any downsides to these games, but I can say with all honesty my biggest issue with most are the long cutscenes. I know it's a silly thing to whine about, especially if you've played any game by this developer, and know that long cutscenes are kind of just a thing that comes with the territory. Upon multiple playthroughs, you'll find yourself skipping through a lot of these, just to save yourself some time. The story is engaging and fun, but as a person who only has so much time and strength, when it comes to a 2-hour cutscene, I have to tap out at some point. Honorable mentions for this section definitely go to Yakuza. I'm going to mention Yakuza 7 in particular. I actually enjoy all of the Yakuza games, and I know I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but Yakuza 7 is actually my favorite Yakuza game. I think it is amazing how you can take one gameplay style and completely change a whole franchise. And quite frankly, I think anyone who hasn't tried Yakuza should start with Yakuza 7 and see if you can get through all the cutscenes, and then you can go jump into the other Yakuzas, because trust me, there's always going to be cutscenes. And last but not least on our list is Spiritfarer 2020. So let's take a step away from the action and let's go somewhere a bit simpler. I feel like I haven't really been mentioning enough indie games on here, so here it goes. Number 5 is Spiritfarer. Released in 2020, Spiritfarer is an indie management sim and sandbox action game. Well, I'll have to admit, the action game aspect of this certainly played down a little bit more than I would expect than the description it gave, but I would like to mention that the management sim and sandbox are absolutely correct. You play as a young human and her cat that wake up on Charon's Ferry, and are assigned to the new Ferryman of the Dead. While this may sound very metal at the beginning, it's mainly just you going around and helping out souls who haven't been properly put to rest. The art style is unique and hard to take your eyes off, and it's well written. The soundtrack is something to appreciate as well. The building aspects of the game are really satisfying and intensely enjoyable. They're really intuitive and easy to pick up for anyone. I usually don't recommend people play games on like smaller consoles. I've usually been a person who would say use your big console, that's why it's there. But this is one of the few times I would recommend that if you have a Nintendo Switch, you pull that baby out and you use that instead. Sponsor me, Nintendo. I'll be honest, it's pretty hard to find negatives for this game. With a near-perfect score on every platform I look it up on, it would seem most agree with me as well. Honestly, all in all I can say is try Spiritfarer. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Well, alright. With all that quick talking, holy moly, maybe I talked too quick. I expected this entire script to take like a really long time, and here we sit at about 18 minutes, so I guess for that sake, you don't have to listen to me talk for too much longer. But I figure if we're going to round out our video here, I would like to ask that you please support us on Patreon if you enjoy the work I'm doing. We'll only go up from here. And just a quick thanks to everyone who has made it on our Discord already, everyone who's made it onto our Patreon, Alex, Wayne, and Travis. Thank you so much for being a part of this at such an early stage. And if you're watching this on YouTube, Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and 360 no scope that like hand. Thanks for watching, guys.